everyone. Hello and happy Fair Housing Month. Thank you for joining us today for our Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Outreach Grant Introduction Workshop. We are so glad you're here. My name is Kimmy Johnson, and I'm the Fair Housing Education and Outreach Coordinator with the Housing and Community Development Department. So I am the lead for all things related to this program, as well as programs like the Fair Housing Ambassador Program and workshops such as the Fair Housing Workshop for landlords and property managers that's currently running this month. So this is our third year offering this program, and we are thrilled to do so because not only does it continue to grow, but the outreach helps so many Houstonians. So I'll be back a little later in the presentation, but at this time, I want to turn things over to my colleague, Miss Megan Rowe, who's going to be moderating today's presentations. Megan?
Thank you, Kimmy. As Kimmy said, my name is Megan Rowe, and I'm the Fair Housing Analyst for the department. I am very excited to be moderating for you today. We are joined by Vlad Ibarra from the Office of Emergency Management, commonly known as OEM, who will be sharing information about the Hurricane Preparedness Outreach and resources available for nonprofits and other community organizations. My partner on the Fair Housing team, who you just heard from, Kimmy Johnson, is the lead on this funding opportunity, and she will also present on the details of the grant itself. I want to cover a few housekeeping matters before we move on to the program overview. First, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our Fair Housing website so that you can reference what was covered during this pre-proposal workshop as you prepare your applications. Also, we will go through this as we go through this workshop. Please know that you can ask questions at any time. You can do so by typing in the Q&A box provided at the left of your screen, which you can toggle on and off by clicking the chat icon at the top of the screen. If you're joining this workshop on a mobile device, you can also join the conversation or ask questions by using the chat icon in your app. Our agenda is the last of the housekeeping items. During this workshop, we will be giving a brief overview of the program, a quick review of what fair housing is, and then briefly explore the connection between fair housing and disaster recovery. These topics will be covered more thoroughly in our mandatory Fair Housing 101 workshops. More on that later to come in the presentation. During this workshop, we will also cover hurricane preparedness resources, outline our expectations for program outreach, and cover eligible activities for this program, as well as the program's procurement and application processes. Lastly, we will address any questions that have been posted in the Q&A box. The agenda will remain posted in the Q&A box for your reference for the duration of this workshop. Now let's talk about why we have prioritized hurricane preparedness as part of our fair housing outreach. We believe preparedness is key to equitable recovery. We see a need to develop new ways to center preparedness and emergency planning around the housing needs of the city's most vulnerable residents, including communities of color, people with disabilities, immigrant communities, and people with low incomes. As you are most certainly aware, Houston continues to be impacted by disaster events, most of which have been hurricane and flood related. When combined with pre-existing social and economic injustices, these disaster events intensify barriers to home ownership and home stability, as well as access to quality schools, jobs, and health care. In addition, inequitable recovery often works to perpetuate the racial wealth gap, which further exacerbates these barriers. HCDD is currently involved in long-term housing recovery for a number of recent flooding disasters, through which we are committed to promoting an equitable housing recovery process. This program is one way we can help make disaster planning efforts more inclusive and help prepare vulnerable populations to recover from disasters faster and with more resilience. By working directly with community organizations like yours that intimately understand the needs of their community, we believe that we can better prepare vulnerable residents for the next disaster event by providing resources through this grant opportunity that directly addresses their needs. This Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Outreach Grant has been designed specifically to reach these goals. Rather than using this funding for case management or for building affordable homes, this program has been designed specifically for direct engagement. Grant recipients can use up to $10,000 to 1. Address fair housing and hurricane preparedness through outreach, marketing, education, and training, with an emphasis on reaching historically underserved populations. 2. By building new relationships or enriching existing relationships with partner nonprofits and other community groups to further outreach. And finally, by increasing fair housing awareness and hurricane preparedness at the neighborhood level. It is important to note that grantees will be reimbursed for approved expenditures rather than receive funding at the front end. I will now turn our presentation over to our colleague, Vlad Ibarra from the Office of Emergency Management, who will discuss available hurricane preparedness resources. Vlad?
Megan, thank you so much for that introduction. So as Megan mentioned, my name is Vlad Ibarra, and I'm the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator for the Office of Emergency Management. On a day-to-day, what we do is I basically oversee the planning section, and on the blue skies, we work on strategic development and the implementation of the different plans that we have for the city in order to be more resilient. Our goal is truly to just enhance the city's capacity to prepare, respond, mitigate, and recover from emergency and disasters, and to overall strengthen relationships and collaborations with city departments and the whole community. So that's one of the reasons why I'm actually presenting to you guys, because at the end I'm going to be asking to actually participate in some of our planning efforts as we go forward. Next slide. That's just my introduction. Next slide. Okay, so overall throughout the presentation, I'm going to be going over 4 key points. And because emergencies occur quickly and without a warning, we have 4 key questions that we want to ask you. And so the 4 points that I'm going to be going over during the presentation are going to be making sure that we create some sort of emergency plan, or at least we start thinking about some of those contingencies, that we also build an emergency kit, that we maintain and form, and that we actually know your neighbors and your community so that we can be more resilient. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first question that I wanted to ask the participants is, how many of you have an emergency plan? And you can either just come online or just start providing answers through the chat function. Okay, does anybody want to say some of the things that that plan has, just so we can get the conversation started? We don't have to go off the all the different points that we have on the slide.
Okay, we have some answers coming in from the chat. Plan for pets, no plan. Yes, they do have a plan. If you're raising your hand, feel free to come off mute and just say out loud, that's fine. So it looks like about half and half, yes and
great.
no.
So one of the resources, again, because this is, I think our presentations are all about sort of providing resources and making sure that you're better prepared. And so one of the key items that I wanted to make sure that you know about, especially because, again, you guys represent nonprofits, it's that FEMA actually created a resource, and it's called Organizations Preparing for Emergency Needs. And so if you just go to Google and you type FEMA and you put OPEN, so OPEN, again, OPEN stands for Organizations Preparing for Emergency Needs. What you're going to be able to get is actually a web-based self-guided training in a downloadable instructor kit that will help the participants start knowing about 10 different areas. And so those areas that are going to be key for you is, number one, is understanding the risk for your community. Also safeguarding critical information. So again, for those individuals who say that don't have a plan, these are very specific points that you would want to make sure that that plan it's actually addressing. Also identifying the people that you actually do serve. It also talks about how you can start mitigating some of the risks that are involved. It also talks about how to establish a communications plan. So let me again ask another question for the group. In case of an emergency, how would you communicate with your staff. And again, you can either come online or, you can sort of say it or go into the chat function. And Megan, if you can help me with again, sort of a
What's up?
what's up? Great.
Absolutely.
That's a great that's actually a great way to communicate. And it's funny that whomever said what's up, we actually use that in our department as well. That is a great, easy way that you can communicate with your staff. And again, is low bandwidth, so again your communications are going to go through, and that's actually a great feature. So I would encourage more groups to again use some sort of function. It doesn't have to be what's up. There's tons of them out there, but basically just use whatever works for you. Some of the other sort of resources that are available through that FEMA Open program is determine essential activities. So what are some of those essential activities that you will need in order to again be better prepared in terms of an emergency plan, and also considering some of the cross-training your key individuals. So in case Megan is my lead person for the department, but then Megan is sick, like who can come in and sort of again provide those essential functions that Megan does it in every day, so that again we can continue functioning. Some of the other items in terms of emergency plan are also here on the screen. So basically, again, making sure that we know how to communicate, making sure that you do sort of create a safe place for everyone, make sure that you actually pay attention to local guidance. If you can go to the next slide, please. But again, the last point I wanted to make, again, referring back to that great resource from FEMA, is called Organizations Preparing for Emergency Needs, Open. And if you just Google Open, and if I so correctly, I think that they just put the acronym or the link on the chat feature as well. All right, so let's talk about sort of your actual emergency kit, some of the items that you would want to have there. And so can again, so those folks that actually have an emergency kit, can you tell me some of those items that you do have? I'm just trying to make this as interactive as possible. I can sit here and sort of go off the PowerPoint, but again, I'm trying to just sort of make this as interactive as possible. So any sort of feedback? Or again, just can you talk about some of the items that you actually do have? Insurance documents, Sonia, thank you so much. That's such a great feature that you would need. Absolutely. Someone else? Medical records, absolutely. Oh, look, you guys are spot on. Okay, so you know what? I got to say, perhaps a lot of you guys should be given this presentation. Yeah, again, absolutely. So I would say, in terms of building an emergency kit, I think that the key items that you want to take into consideration, again, all the stuff that we have on the screen, and also just basically looking at your staff, looking at the resources that you would need and the individuals that you serve, and making sure that you actually have all those different items that you would need. So I'll give a perfect example. As part of my emergency kit, I have a small child at home. So then I would have to, again, have items that are sort of relevant for that. If you have pets, making sure that you actually have, comfort food, make sure that you have that comfort toy that they really sort of play well with and interact. So again, you can create some comfort as you're sort of trying to create this emergency kit for both your individual household, for your business. Next slide. Okay, so in this, I guess in this slide, we're just talking about different items in terms of both the unique family needs of the unique needs of your agency and your organization, and the individuals that not only work for you but also that you're going to be serving, because they might be on site, and then you might need to have some of those items. So again, it's just medical treatment. It's some of the stuff that you guys have already mentioned. Again, diapers, special formula, information about generators. Absolutely, that is generator extension cord. Again, thank you so much for the feedback. I truly appreciate again trying to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm trying to give the presentation and also read some of the messages. So what I'll do is I'll just continue doing the presentation. Medication becomes extremely important. Again, we want to make sure that we have that we're prepared. I'll give you a perfect example. So I've been an emergency manager for over a decade, and so I've done emergency management both in the East Coast, the West Coast, and now I'm here in Houston. But when I was in California, my area was actually affected by a wildfire. And so we ended up setting up a recovery center. And so for this recovery center, what we did is we actually had wraparound services, and what that means is basically we had a center in which individuals could come in, and they could basically have access to a lot of different resources that they need, whether it was municipal resources, whether it was some sort of FEMA-related activities, or from nonprofits that were in that area. And I got to say, the individuals that had created an emergency kit and had sort of copies of the insurance, and again had copies of those records, they just fared off so much better because, again, instead of having to duplicate a lot of those records, they already had those copies in place. So being prepared, it just paid huge dividends, and I got to see it again during one of our deployments in California. Next slide. All right. So the next piece that I want to make sure that we're aware is being informed. And so has anybody heard about our website? So I don't know if anybody has been to our website, but our website is houstonemergency.org. And so in houstonemergency.org, you'll be able to find a lot of different information that would be relevant. Oh, thank you so much, Mary, for urging individuals to sign up for emergency alerts. Totally appreciate that. And so in order for you to be informed, you want to make sure that you're actually going to resources or sources that are actually have been vetted and that are providing information that would be really relevant for you. And so I would urge you to, again, go to our website, make sure that not only do you listen to your local TV and radio, but also make sure that you listen to us. One of the ways, especially during a disaster, that we actually get to provide pivotal information to our citizenry is through our social media. So we have, again, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and again, all the different resources, but I would say that is one of the ways that we're able to communicate with individuals. Now, in terms of sort of specific alert systems, as Mary mentioned in the chat, the city actually has Alert Houston. And so what you do with Alert Houston is you're actually able to sign up to receive, again, sort of disaster-related information. And there you'll be able to receive information that's pertinent to the event. We'll also distribute information after an incident through Houston Recovers, and we also have we used to have information in regards to testing information, but that's not really relevant anymore because now, thankfully, we're getting out of that. Next slide. So wireless alerts. So wireless emergency alerts. So these are notifications that come straight to your phone. You don't need to sign up for these. For Alert Houston, you do, because those will be specific to you. The wireless emergency alerts. What they do is they basically provide information in terms of something that is happening within your community. And someone is saying that they can't see the slides, so someone in-house could help with that effort. But again, these are basically information that a lot of times, even when you're driving, you'll see them. That is either an Amber Alert. Those are sort of, again, fall within the area of wireless emergency alerts. Okay. So in this slide, we talk about knowing your neighbors, and I know because of sort of again, the presentation is more geared towards individuals. For you specifically, I would say one of the key items that you would want to make sure that you know is have considerations in terms of your supply chain. And what I mean by that is making sure that you actually identify those important suppliers that are actually providing you information, so that in case you do have a disruption, then you'll be able to, again, sort of continue your essential functions. So again, in this section, knowing your neighbors is extremely important, and that creates a lot of community resiliency. But one of the key points for you as a nonprofit would be to, again, have considerations in regards to your supply chains and the important suppliers that are giving you those essential information or those essential key elements that you need. We also have community emergency response teams, and actually there's a rodeo. So when people take the community emergency response teams, what they do is they actually have a gathering. They call it a rodeo. So on Saturday, there's going to be one of those events, and I'll send the information to Kimmy so it can be distributed in case you would want to participate. That's taking place this Saturday. But community emergency response teams are also another way that you can participate in the community. Here from the city of Houston, one of the things that was created after our winter storm was the city actually realized that there were a lot of different city staffers that really wanted to help, and so we created a HERT, and HERT stands for Houston Emergency Response Team. And again, this is a team that helps when we have a disaster. So these are some of the, again, sort of preparing your community that it's going to make us more resilient. Okay, so let's talk about individuals with functional or access needs. So I think this goes back to the point that we were saying, knowing your stakeholders, identifying the individuals that you actually serve. And so one of the ways that we do that through our office is we urge individuals to sign up to our state of Texas, our emergency registry, and your information is confidential. And you can register online at texas.org, or you can call 211. One of the key points that we're doing in terms of steer from our department perspective is that we continue updating the list to make sure that, again, we don't have duplication of individuals, and that the list is as clear and as updated as possible. So in case of an emergency, we can reach out to those individuals, or we can send teams to sort of check on them. So making sure that you build a support system, again, that is a key point in a consideration that you would have to take as part of the, again, sort of your preparedness, and making sure that you actually highlight and know what specific items those individuals would need. So again, this goes back to that preparedness piece. Again, making sure that you ID the individuals that you serve to ensure that their needs continue to be met during an incident. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about hurricanes. So hurricanes are actually our number one threat according to our multi-hazard mitigation plan and the different consequence analysis that we have run for the city. And so some of the key questions that you would need to grapple with is, are you in an evacuation zone, or is your agency in an evacuation zone? Is that something that you know? Can I actually, let me bring this back to the group. Is this something, are any of you guys in an evacuation zone right now? And again, you can either just come online, or you can sort of do it through the chat function. All right, I'm not seeing any movement. Another key question that you need to take into consideration is, do you need electricity to sustain life? That is a key consideration. Again, that goes back to maybe, and if so, then you would want to make sure that that individual or that those constituencies actually sign up for the steer. And then, is your home strong enough to withstand the force of wind? So speaking of wind, let's go to the next slide, please. Actually, I'm sorry, hit one back. I just realized that. Okay, so basically if we were to have a hurricane, there are certain points that I wanted to make. So number one is we need to take into consideration the hurricane strength. And so basically we have 5 categories when it comes to hurricane strength. So we have a category 1, which means that you would have some damage. And so those are winds between 74 and 95 miles per hour. We also have a category 2, which goes from 96 miles to about 110, and this would be extensive damage. And then we have categories 3, 4, and 5, and these are basically categories that the wind speed starts at 110, and then they can exceed 157 miles per hour. And then again, categories 3, 4, and 5 are devastating or catastrophic at that point. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you remain indoors until the storm has fully passed. Make sure that the best place for you to actually stay is in an interior hallway, a bathroom, or a closet on the lowest level, and make sure that you shelter under something sturdy. Next slide. Okay, so these are some of the items that we would want to use in order to, again, sort of mitigate the disasters. And so purchasing flood insurance, finding out about your flood risk, and I will actually again follow up and send you a specific. There's specific sort of guidance where you can actually put your zip code and then figure out if you have a flood risk. And again, I will follow up with that information, and then make sure that you get a weather alert radio. That's also helpful as well. One of the other points that I wanted to cover is in terms of just the hurricanes, there are some terms that I want to make sure that I do address. So we have a hurricane watch, and a hurricane watch is actually issued when a hurricane force winds exceeds about 74 miles per hour. And at that point, the for the most part, the hurricane is going to be 40 hours away. And then it turns into a warning. And so a warning is actually issued when the hurricane force winds are about 36 hours out. And so again, those two terms, make sure that you know them. So again, when you're listening to the information. So the first one was a hurricane watch. So again, it's issued when the wind's force is about over 74 miles per hour and it's about 48 hours away. And then the hurricane warning is issued 36 hours out. Next slide. So it's funny. I'm in evacuation, but so Kimmy, quick question for you guys: is there a section before or after the evacuation that talks about the hazards? And if not, I can go up this slide. I just want to make sure.
So we have the natural hazards hurricane, which you just went over, and the severe weather with flood smart on it.
So Megan, take me to the flood one, please.
Sure. Flood.
And I'll go back. We can go back to the evacuation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of evacuation, so the key points in terms of an evacuation are making sure that you know your zone and that you know your route. And the zones are actually the way that those have been created is they're actually done via zip code. So making sure that you know your zip codes. One of the things that I'm going to do at the end is I'm actually going to give you some of the resources that we have in-house, and then you'll be able to have this information so you can actually look at the map. I know that is kind of difficult to see this information here on the screen. Next slide. So after the disaster, so in terms of the recovery process, so these are some of the key points that, again, that you would want to have into consideration. So if you're returning home or to your business, making sure that you actually wait for those official instructions to return. Again, the disaster can cause damages to your home and create safety hazards. So again, make sure that it's safe for you to return. And then make sure that you actually discard any food that has been left unrefrigerated or that has been damaged. And then in terms of assistance, what we do is, depending on the size and the scale of the emergency, our department will be working with both federal partners and also state partners to create, again, resources for you. And these would be ways for you to, again, have information. So it'll be individual assistance, public assistance, but that information would be sort of based upon the incident and sort of the damages that were created for our area specifically. So making sure that, I would say one key point, I think with COVID, a lot of us are actually taking this into consideration, is the stress and the strong emotions that are associated with again, with any sort of disaster. And so making sure that we're actually accounting for that mental health piece, I think is extremely important as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, these are some of the resources that we have available. So again, I would urge you to go to HoustonEmergency.org. We actually have a lot of information there. One of the key points for nonprofits that I also wanted to highlight is, in case there is some sort of active shooter event, what we actually tell individuals to do is there's a video, and it's called Run, Hide, or Fight. It's about a 5-minute video. It was actually done in-house here in Houston, and it's a great resource for you to take into account some of the items that you would want to consider. Should you be dealing with an active shooter incident, but it might be an opportunity for you to actually bring up the issue with your staff. And again, it's a great resource that we have available. Also, we have a winter preparedness from the city that's going to be taking place on June 11th, Saturday, June 11th. Again, our winter preparedness. This is going to take place at the GRB from 9 to 2, because this would be a great resource for you to not only sort of see. We're going to be having 2 tables, so you'll see individuals from our department, but you will also see a lot of different resources throughout the city that will be at this winter preparedness event. And again, this is taking place on Saturday, June 11th. And then there's an overall resilient effort that the city, there are a lot of different activities that are taking place, but one of the key items and one of the key points that I want to highlight is, from our department perspective, we have a lot of different plans. There's about 22 plans that deal with hazard specific incidents, but we really want community input. So one of the things that our plans unfortunately don't have is our plans basically don't reflect the needs of our communities. We haven't had a lot of stakeholder engagement meetings in which we actually sit down and listen to the community and the community needs. And so these are great ways for you to provide that input to us. And so we're going to be kicking off those efforts in the next month and a half. So I'm going to be giving our information to Kimmy, but when you see those, I would please urge you to, again, attend those community meetings because we're going to be creating the plans for our communities. And so if we have your input, then they will be better served, and they will actually talk to the different needs that we actually are trying to address. And should you, in case there's no further questions, then I think my presentation is completed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vlad. Before you leave, can you say again the times and dates of the event that you mentioned?
Absolutely. So the Winter Expo is going to take place on Saturday, June 11th. It's taking place at the GRB, and it's from 9 to 2. And I will send you the information, Megan, so that you have it. I think that they're still working on the fly because again, it's taking place in June. But I wanted to make sure that people put it down on the calendar because it will be a great resource for individuals to receive preparedness specific information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks again to Vlad for such a always informative presentation. I know we have a lot of questions about slides, so I just want to reiterate they will be posted on the website afterwards so you can get all this great information. We will also be emailing it to everybody who has registered. So you will be getting that in your email through the email that you registered. So this entire presentation, including the disaster preparedness section.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to talk for a moment about a few fair housing basics so we are all on the same page as we go through the rest of the presentation. So the Fair Housing Act, also known as Title VIII of the 1968 Civil Rights Act, is a federal law that prohibits housing discrimination in housing transactions against 7 protected classes. The 7 protected classes include race, which is a grouping of individuals associated with a racial or ethnic group; color, which refers to the pigmentation of skin as an indication of someone's race; national origin, which is the relationship between an individual and a state and refers to a person's ancestry, birthplace, ethnic background, or language; familial status, which protects families with children under the age of 18 from discriminatory actions. And this includes people adopting children, legal guardians of children, foster parents, grandparents with dependents, and pregnant women. Religion, which refers to all aspects of religious belief, observance, practice, and includes assumptions about a person's religion as well. Disability, which includes physical, cognitive, intellectual, and mental impairments if the impairment substantially limits major life activities. And last but not least, sex, which has an important recent update. Last year, HUD announced that it will administer and enforce the Fair Housing Act to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity under the protected class of sex. We will cover more about these classes and their connection to hurricane preparedness during our upcoming Fair Housing 101 workshops. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination towards individuals in protected classes in a broad range of housing-related transactions. Here's a couple of examples. For instance, a realtor could not steer a family away from purchasing a home in a majority white neighborhood because they are Black. A bank could not impose a higher interest rate on loans specifically for Hispanic home buyers. A landlord could not produce discriminatory advertisements that say no children or only provide advertisements in English in an area highly populated by people who speak Spanish. And a landlord couldn't say that a second-floor apartment is unavailable to a person in a wheelchair, even though it is actually available for rent. It is critical that people report housing discrimination. Unfortunately, discriminatory acts that go unreported go unnoticed. There are several ways that someone can file a complaint. Anyone can file a complaint directly to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, often referred to as HUD, and all Texas residents can file through the Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division. Houston also has a nonprofit organization called the Greater Houston Fair Housing Center that can assist residents in filing a complaint. Now, that was just a very brief glimpse into the basics of fair housing. To ensure that applicants applying for this program are knowledgeable about fair housing and housing discrimination in Houston, we are holding a mandatory Fair Housing 101 workshop for all applicants. These will be interactive workshops where general fair housing information will be given, along with detailed discussions around the connections between fair housing and inequitable disaster impact and recovery. We will talk about how to identify the tools and techniques relevant to applicants' communities and help applicants identify preparedness activities that will help to promote faster recovery after disasters for their communities. For applicants' convenience, we are offering the course at 2 different times this month. Applicants are only required to attend one session. The course will be identical for each session, though due to the interactive nature of the courses, the discussions may differ from one to the next. Applicants who have taken a version of this course in the past must still attend at least one session. You can sign up for one of these 2 workshops through our website. Okay. So now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Kimmy Johnson, who will continue the conversation around fair housing and explore with you its connection to disaster recovery. She will then walk through our program particulars with you. Kimmy?
Thank you, Megan, and thanks again to Vlad for that great information. And so now that we've covered fair housing and those protected under the Fair Housing Act, we're going to discuss Houston's most recent natural disasters and the impacts that they've had on our most vulnerable communities. So since 2015, Houston has experienced 8 presidentially declared disasters for hurricane and flood events. But in addition to these flood disasters, Houston had 2 additional federally declared disasters, including the COVID-19 pandemic and Winter Storm Uri. So as we've seen over the past few years with multiple disasters impacting area residents, it's important that Houstonians are prepared for any type of disaster. So this slide here illustrates the estimated residential damage from our most recent flooding events. So as you know, Harvey was the largest of these recent flooding events. And as seen on this slide, the damage to residential buildings and the loss of personal property resulted in the loss of billions of dollars. The direct damage to homes that were caused by floodwaters and the indirect impacts resulting from flooding, such as displacement, had significant impacts on the broader housing market. And when Harvey struck in 2017, many homes in Houston had already been damaged, and thousands of people had yet to recover from the previous flooding events. And after Harvey, additional disasters have compounded the impacts for some. So this presentation will be interactive, and we definitely want to hear from you. So please utilize the chat. So we want you to think back to past flooding or any other disaster events. What were some of the difficulties or the challenges that you or your family or someone you know faced? And if you could, please take a moment to do so, to drop those in the chat. And while y'all are doing that, you may recall very recently that Winter Storm Uri, there were millions of homes and businesses across the state that were without power and some without water for several days due to burst pipes. And for some, finding safe drinking water or taking a shower or even using mobile devices became increasingly difficult. So those are just a few challenges that I can recall. But Megan, can you share a few replies from the chat?
Absolutely. So we have some, and people are echoing the same ideas. Outages during the 2021 winter storm, no power, no water during Uri as well. Some families did not know how to or who to call for assistance, lack of electricity, gas shortages. Lots of things happening during these winter storm events.
Most definitely. Those are perfect examples. Again, they're recent, so they're not that hard to recall. But absolutely. So thank you for sharing those.
We have some from Harvey as well. No water, no fuel, no communications. More things are coming in. No available resources for low-income families, no power, phones went dead, which nobody was prepared for. Absolutely, if you have an internet phone, that's gone. The homeless were displaced without shelter, not knowing how to navigate through FEMA's sequences of delivery events. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So, hurricane season is one of the most dangerous periods of the year for our city. And we've seen time and time again that the impacts from storms disproportionately impact already vulnerable populations. And so, the people that are most impacted by hurricanes and other extreme weather related events are also the people most at risk of housing discrimination. Additionally, when these communities are displaced or otherwise impacted by storms, they have fewer resources. They may be either unaware of their rights or are more likely to have fewer options already. So, discrimination has a greater impact. So, by connecting hurricane preparedness and fair housing information for this program, we're working to lessen the impact of the housing discrimination that may happen after a storm. And as Megan mentioned earlier, the Fair Housing 101 workshop, we're going to take a deeper dive into this connection, which in turn will help applicants identify preparedness activities that will better serve your communities. So, right now, we want to hear from you again. So, we've talked about some of the risks that the general population face as a result of natural disasters, but we know that you, the community advocates and organizations, understand that vulnerable groups experience a different set of challenges after disasters and may require a different approach to receive preparedness information. And at this time, please take a moment to jot down some of your challenges that vulnerable communities experience during disasters. And we're going to read a few of them aloud.
So we had a couple come in through our last session that I'll read aloud as these come through. And I want to encourage everybody, even after we move on, keep putting things in. This is great for everyone to read. So direct caregivers could not get to people with disabilities at their homes, which left people with disabilities unable to reach out and get help or care. And now we have some new things coming in, language barriers, people with disabilities having major transportation issues and challenges. Again, not knowing where to go or who to call, finding housing after you lost everything, navigating FEMA and insurance, not having adequate insurance, elderly populations not being able to navigate online application processes. Again, communication is an issue, access to resources as an issue. Oh, people are pouring in some great examples here. Educational barriers to understanding forms and applications. And again, communication.
Thank you. Yeah, those are definitely great examples. And you guys are thinking in the right path. So, this outreach program is designed to help meet the challenges and the barriers that you've just identified and to help build resilience in these communities. And so we hope that you'll keep these challenges in mind as you're planning your ideas for your outreach and your activities. But on the topic of barriers, it's important to note that hurricane preparedness information and resilience outreach for vulnerable communities requires a more targeted approach than the outreach for the general population. And so on this slide, there are a few examples of some barriers to disaster recovery that are faced by three groups in particular. So after a disaster, lower income households are among the most vulnerable because of their limited ability to pay for alternative housing or to fund home repair or to replace the damaged things in their home. Households with lower incomes are the least likely to recover from a natural disaster in a reasonable amount of time. People with disabilities may require homes with special accommodations, like wider doorways for wheelchairs, which may be harder to find after a disaster. And next, although age is not a protected class under the Fair Housing Act, age is correlated with disability as many seniors have disabilities. And some seniors are more at risk from achieving a swift and full recovery because they may be isolated and may not know about available resources. And so, again, I just want to note that during the Fair Housing 101 workshop, we're going to cover these barriers and a few more in detail. So please be sure to register. And so now we're going to transition to the outreach for this program. So throughout this presentation, we've stated, again, that the people that are most impacted by hurricanes and other extreme weather events are also the people most at risk of housing discrimination. And impacts from the storms disproportionately impact already vulnerable populations. And so for that reason, for this program in particular, we're focusing our outreach on historically underserved communities, such as communities of color, people with disabilities, people with limited English proficiency, seniors, immigrant communities, low-income households, and vulnerable people who have been impacted or displaced by past storms. So those are the target communities. Okay, eligible activities. The city has reach and resources, but we are not based in individual neighborhoods the way that you community advocates and organizations are. And because Houston is so diverse, the communities have different needs. And so we know that general information about fair housing and preparation directly from the city may not reach certain communities who need it most. So for this program, we're relying on your knowledge and your expertise about the most effective ways to distribute information to vulnerable populations, and also what messages will best meet the common goal of preparing all Houstonians for this hurricane season. So remember that this program is going to focus on education and outreach, and these activities are a requirement of funding. So we'll cover some examples of eligible activities. So they may include conducting an educational training and workshop about fair housing and flood preparedness. We can execute marketing campaigns using mixed media, develop and distribute marketing materials that share important information about fair housing and hurricane preparedness. And I want to add here that any social media campaigns that you do must include information about fair housing and hurricane preparedness. So that means that social media posts that consist of you just promoting your event or your organization are not considered as part of the campaign and they are ineligible. And lastly, signups for flood insurance, or you can do building and distributing go bags with information about fair housing and shelter in place kits that Vlad from OEM covered earlier in the presentation. And I want to point out here that anything that is distributed, whether it be go bags or brochures or checklists, it must include fair housing component and fair housing information, or it is ineligible. And so we'll cover ineligible activities in more details on the next slide. So there are also a number of ineligible activities that are not allowed due to the nature and the funding of this grant. And they include items or activities that are related to advertising or marketing of your nonprofit, any advertising or marketing of any activities that are not related to fair housing, alcoholic beverages, of course, case management, donations, any costs that are associated with entertainment or fundraising, also any gift cards that you're using at events, lobbying, any organization costs, and refreshments. And finally, all activities that are conducted through this grant must be a part of your proposal and approved by our staff. And so activities also outside of Houston city limits or do not serve Houstonians are ineligible. So we're going to cover examples of outreach strategies. Fair housing outreach can include reaching underserved populations with hurricane preparation information so they can be more resilient in future disasters. But it can also include combining information about fair housing, including the rights of protected classes and how to file a fair housing complaint with hurricane preparedness information. And so we know that outreach and resilience preparation tactics for these vulnerable communities may be different than the wider population. So, for instance, flood preparation for people without transportation or with mobility issues may be different. And there may be a need for new outreach materials for these groups. And also, existing outreach materials may be needed in various languages that have not yet been translated. Organizations may also want to partner with grassroots or other organizations that can reach a wider audience or in a different way with resilience and fair housing information. And next, due to the pandemic, many of the ways of outreach and public engagement that has happened in the past may not be as effective as it is today. But you may consider using new media tactics to engage the public through electronic or with printed materials. And finally, if your organization has case managers, for instance, that work directly with residents, or the organization may want to provide training for your staff members about fair housing and ways to overcome housing discrimination. So this information could be incorporated into your staff interactions with the public so that both staff and residents are more aware of fair housing discrimination and how to report it. So I just covered some examples of how the fair housing could be incorporated into your outreach that you're already doing or that you know needs to be done. Okay, so the fun part. Last year, we partnered with 5 local organizations to reach more than 500,000 people who typically do not receive hurricane preparedness outreach through traditional methods. And those organizations are the Alliance, Fifth Ward CRC, Neighborhood Recovery CDC, VN Teamwork, and YMCA International Services. So we mentioned the importance of meeting these vulnerable communities where they are. And so here are a few examples from last year's program. And so on the screen, the first example is from a food distribution event. And this organization used signage and brochures as people waited in line. The next example is from an organization that partnered with local organizations for a community event that engaged the youth with fair housing information. And the last example on this page is from an organization that supplied their communities with go bags that were loaded with hurricane preparedness and fair housing resources. Okay, so we also had several organizations that leveraged their social media following and they launched a series of posts over the span of the outreach period that provided fair housing and preparedness tips and tools and resources that resonated with their target communities. And so here are a couple of examples. On this last set of examples, these are from organizations whose focus was on reaching limited English proficiency populations. And so as you can see here, they utilize multi-language marketing materials and PSAs on a popular South Asian radio station in their outreach. So you can definitely be as creative as possible. All that is welcome. Okay, so you guessed it. We want to hear from you again. Now that you have some understanding of what the Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Preparedness Outreach Program is designed to do and the groups that we want you to reach, what do you think would help vulnerable populations be more prepared? So please take a second and drop those responses in the chat.
Okay, here we go. Going into these populations and making it known, the hurricane preparedness information, meeting them where they are to get the information needed. Excellent. Different modes of communication, as stated, educating vulnerable populations about their resources that are available. Education and training on proper use of flotation devices. Training populations using flyers. Lots of great ideas coming through. Okay, my screen is loading very fast. Having neighborhood meetings, passing out supplies, flashlights, making sure to leave vital information with people. Education, making sure to supply handouts. Very good information. Please continue to put this in so that everybody can read your responses. This is fantastic.
Yes, just want to echo great responses, and those are the type of activities that will be very beneficial to these communities. So thank you. Okay, so who should apply? Excuse me, I'll go back one. At this time, I'm going to cover the eligibility and the evaluation criteria for the program. So for this grant, we are seeking organizations that have capacity to effectively execute outreach and education programs to vulnerable communities. And so these organizations should be able to work at the neighborhood level to build knowledge, ensuring that residents are better prepared for hurricane season and flooding disasters. So some information about the grant award. This grant utilizes HUD's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. So select groups will be reimbursed for eligible costs according to federal regulations for fair housing activities, which include education and outreach to raise awareness around fair housing. And I just want to reiterate that this is a reimbursement-based grant, and all invoices, along with proof of completion and any supporting documentation, must be submitted. For each organization that is selected will receive a maximum of $10,000. But for more information on government grant awards in general, please refer to the Code of Federal Regulations, Title II, Part 200. So priority when it comes to the application will be giving to applicants who show a history or demonstrated ability to reach and engage members from underserved communities in similar ways to the proposed activities in their outreach and marketing plan. Applicants who propose activities which engage and benefit historically underserved communities. To applicants who propose activities that are well planned and suitable for the goals and objectives of the program. To applicants who propose activities who have a long-term impact within the organization and or the community. To applicants who utilize existing community initiatives such as complete communities or relationships with other organizations to enhance their outreach efforts. And finally, to applicants who have a history, of past performance in the Fair Housing Outreach Grants with HCDD. So that can include the Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Preparedness Outreach programs from the previous years, or the Ambassador Program, or those related programs. Okay, so at this time, we're going to transition to the procurement procedures and the application for this funding opportunity. So in order to participate, all organizations must be registered as a vendor for the City of Houston and actively registered in the System for Award Management. If you need to register as a vendor, or if you just aren't sure if your organization is already registered, the Strategic Procurement website has helpful tools and resources for you. And please note that you must have an EIN number. But before submitting the application, you must confirm that you understand that in order to be a recipient of this grant, you must be registered as a City of Houston vendor and registered and active on sam.gov under the name of the organization that is submitting the application. And if you have any questions about registration, please contact Clarence at clarence.moden@houstontx.gov. And we have his contact information on the screen. And Clarence may also be on hand during the Q&A. I'm not sure, so he may be on hand to answer any of those questions that you may have. Okay, but on to how to apply. The application period for this grant has been open as of March 24th. And all interested applicants must complete an online application and attend at least one of the 2 virtual fair housing workshop sessions in order to qualify. The deadline to submit an application is on May 6th. And at this time, I am going to switch over to show you the different components of the application. So please bear with us as we switch over. Thank you. Okay. So this is page 1 of the online application, and just a few things to keep in mind as you complete the application for this program. As you advance through each page of the application, depending on your browser, your responses may or may not be saved. And so also your application will not be submitted until you select the Submit Application button on the last page, which we'll cover. So this first page just includes some details about the program, and the evaluation criteria, as well as some key dates that are just a reminder. But at the bottom of the page is the SAM.gov and the City of Houston vendor registration information that we just covered on the previous slide. Okay, so on this next page, we want the contact information for the person that's completing this application, as well as the information for the person that's going to be responsible for conducting the outreach for this program. And so on this page, there's a section to provide an overview, here it is right here, of your organization and any question, some questions about your past outreach and the impact. Okay, so on page 3 of the application is where you should provide as much detail as possible about your proposed outreach. And so here I want to highlight question 18, this question right here on this page. So we know that there will be barriers when communicating with vulnerable communities. And so what we're interested in here is knowing that you understand the barriers your community faces and how you will address them. So again, please provide as much detail as possible on this page. Okay, the conflict of interest. So participants in HCDD programs are required to disclose any potential conflicts of interest. There is a link to complete the conflict of interest form right here. I'll show you. To complete it and to upload it to your application. But if you are not quite sure if there's a conflict, we ask that you still apply and let the legal department make that decision. So this is the form that you will complete. It looks like it's fillable, and you'll just attach it to your application here. Okay, so on this page, we just ask you to acknowledge that you understand what activities are eligible and ineligible. So here's just a reminder of that list that we covered early in the presentation. Okay, so on to the budget. Here we ask you to list your proposed activities using the grant budget and activities worksheet. So here is where you would, this link is where you download the form, and I'll show you what that form looks like. Okay, so this is the form. Here we want you to modify this budget template to reflect the needs of your proposal. And the sum of that budget should not exceed $10,000. And so next, you'll just save it and upload it to your application. And you can do so right here. Okay, last but not least, here's where you would submit your application. And just remember that you have to click submit application, or we will not get a notification, or we will not receive it. So I am going to switch back over to the presentation. Just bear with us. Okay, so I know that we covered a lot today, and I just want to remind you that if you miss anything, or if you want to share this information with your colleagues, it is being recorded and will be uploaded to the website following the event. And that website is here on the screen. I will also put it in the chat, but if you register, you will also receive a copy of the slides via email. So please look out for that email. Okay, so here are just a few key dates to keep in mind. There will be 2 opportunities to attend the required Fair Housing 101 workshop sessions. Session 1 is next Thursday at 10 a.m., but we have another one. Session 2 is on April 27th at 1 p.m. And to register, please visit the program page. And finally, all outreach activities must be completed by November 11th. So if you've made it to this point of the presentation, I want to thank you for your time and for your attention. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Megan for the Q&A session.
Hi, thank you, Kimmy. Okay, so we have now concluded the Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Outreach Grant Introduction Workshop presentation. At this time, we are going to review the questions in the Q&A, and our team will answer any questions you may have. So please make sure to type in your questions now if you have not already. I know we have a few that have already come in. So let's begin. First of all, how long does it take to become a vendor and get approval? I can answer that. So we want you to get moving on the SAMs in the city of Houston as quickly as you can. These things can be brief in a couple of days, but it can also, depending on what your barriers are, what comes up. This is something you want to build in a couple weeks for. If you can prove to us that you have by the time of your application that you're still waiting final approval, that's fine, as long as you tell us in your application what stage you're at. But we cannot grant you the funding. We cannot say, hey, you've been awarded until we have those numbers. So this is key information. You will not receive a grant if you do not have that information from SAMS and from the city of Houston. Another question, can we save and return to the application, or must we submit everything at once?
So it does depend on your browser. I'm not sure, sometimes they save, but I would just, you're able to kind of click through so you can know what to expect or what information you have to download and upload. But I would not rely on it to be saved. I don't think that again, it just depends on your browser. But the application is open, so if you just want to click through and before you submit, you can definitely do so to know what information you need to have on hand to prepare.
Thank you. What is the time frame for spending the funding, and or when is the final report due?
So all outreach activities must be concluded by November 11th. Now, as far as spending, I'm not sure what that part of the question means, but out anytime during that period. So I think maybe the person is asking for like the reimbursement from the time that the outreach period starts until November. During that time, if you want to submit invoices to be paid, you can definitely do so throughout that period. And more information about invoicing and all of that will be covered during during an orientation for the selected organizations.
Okay. Will we get a Zoom link sent to us for the 101 workshops?
So there are, like you register for this one, there is there are registration links on our homepage and also, on the program page, but also in this chat to register for either 101 session. So, and we'll drop those links again if you need them handy.
And it is Teams, not Zoom, so just be prepared for that. What is the reimbursement time frame since funding is on a reimbursement basis? Fair question.
So once the invoices are submitted to us, and once we receive them with everything that we're needed to send them over to finance for processing, I believe the amount of time is about 30 days to be paid.
Can we share the information provided on the presentations today with our communities?
Absolutely, sure. We want you to.
We are set up Air East. I'm not sure. Is the PO created automatically when funds are awarded?
And I'm sorry, can you read that question again?
I'm not sure what this is asking, but so is the PO created automatically when funds are awarded? So maybe walk us through the PO process, how that works with the addendums. I'm happy to if you.
Sure, take it away.
Sure. Okay, so what will happen is if you become a finalist, we will have a pre-selection interview where we will go over your PO addendum. So the PO addendum is basically the contract that's attached to the PO. And so whatever your proposal is, we will create that together, and then it will be sent through our finance process. So it will be created through, you will be asked to use DocuSign to sign the final PO and addendum. And that can, it kind of depends on response time, but that can be very brief. It's just a matter of getting things in and emailing. Okay, sorry, there's a lot of questions. Where was I? Can we schedule a presentation for our super neighborhood? And just a note, Kimmy's about to address the fair housing with OEM. They are also available to make presentations about preparedness.
Yes, fair housing information is available to anyone who wants to present it to any of their communities, whether it's a part of this group or whether you are a selected applicant or not. And also, our department, and we have some resources on our fair housing website, but also someone from our department, most likely me, is available to come out and assist with presentations or if you have a group together and you want us to come and tell you all the things about fair housing, we're happy to do so. So we'll cover some of that information also on the next few slides.
Do we have to spend the same amount as the grant to get the full amount?
You will get the amount, whatever amount that you put that just does not exceed the $10,000. So whatever you've budgeted in your application is the amount that that you'd receive if you completed the proposed activities that you had intended to do.
Okay, what is the total amount of available funds for the project, and how many organizations will the project fund?
We will most likely fund up to 5 organizations, up to $10,000 each.
Why is this a reimbursement funding grant only?
And Mary, do you want me to hand that one over to you?
I'm happy to take it. Yeah, okay. So unfortunately, this is the nature of the funding. We are funded by federal grants to give these grants, and this is how it works. We do understand the difficulties of having money on the front end or not having the funding on the front end, and this is something we are looking into. But unfortunately, as we stand right now, it is reimbursement only. Oh. Will organizations be awarded for partial amounts? If we request $10,000, will some only be awarded $4,000, for example? Kimmy, would you like
Sorry,
me to?
so I'm sorry, is the person asking if if their activities only cost $4,000? I'm sorry, I don't
I think
understand.
this could go either way. So,
Okay.
yeah.
You'll get the amount that you've budgeted for in your application, in your proposal. So definitely, please put a lot of thought into what things cost and how much it costs to run the outreach for your organization. Think about the staff that are going to do it. Think about all of those components as you are doing your budget for your activities, because once whatever's in your application is what we have to honor, and you aren't usually able to go back and make any edits. So definitely please just give it more thought before submitting for the amounts that you need.
And we also want to make sure that no one is afraid to ask for the amount that they believe they need. As long as you can back it up and you have that need, don't feel like you have to under budget. Okay. Well, if you have any other questions that come up afterwards or that come up in the chat, please email them to fairhousing@houstontx.gov or tx.gov, and we will be happy to address these. So we have another question coming in for clarification. Since this is about funding, yes, please submit that. Always go by the rule. If one person is asking the question, then 5 others haven't, and they haven't asked. Okay. So will the $10,000 be given at once or by parts? Again, this is not, we will not be giving $10,000 on the front end. It's a reimbursement, so it's based on the invoices that are submitted. We encourage invoices throughout the process, so as to not build up too much paperwork on the back end. You will, though, in your PO addendum, be identified whatever it is you asked for. So if it was $4,000 or $10,000, it will be in your contract. So that is that is granted to you. You just have to make sure to submit those invoices and the deliverables that go with them. And do we recommend a specific browser for the application? And I'm seeing Kimmy say no. Do we know which one is having more issues? Unfortunately, no. We know there are issues based on information that comes from applicants, but we don't have that information.
Yeah,
At the city, we use Chrome, and it seems to be pretty stable, but I can't say that for certain. Okay,
I would
guys,
just, sorry, I just want to add, I would just advise again to click through. The application is open. Click through it, test it. You don't have to submit anything. Even if you accidentally submit, you can submit a complete application. So definitely, please just test your browsers ahead of time. You don't want to get in there and realize that things don't send. So it's open. We encourage you to just test it.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we will move on. And again, please submit those questions that come up to fairhousing@houstontx.gov. Okay, sure, my screen has gone kind of funny. So, okay, so fair housing resources. Again, we want to, before we go, we want to make sure that we have a number of resources on these next slides that we think you might find very helpful. Our fair housing team has a variety of outreach materials that you can use and share with your communities. Again, this is regardless of whether or not you are given the grant. If you want to go out tomorrow, feel free. We have downloadable fair housing information in 6 different languages on our website. We also have a landlord-tenant fair housing hotline that is free to any caller. This hotline is a great resource, and we want people to know that they can call anytime they have tenant, landlord, or fair housing questions. We can also provide a staff member, and I know this question has come up multiple times in the chat. We can provide a staff member from the fair housing team to give presentations on any fair housing related topics, which include residents' rights under the Fair Housing Act, tenant and landlord issues, and the fair housing complaint process. And we are happy to present on any of these. So please, if you have questions about this grant, please email the Fair Housing email. But if you have a specific request for a presentation, please email kimmy.johnson@houstontx.gov. Her contact information is on the screen there. We also, apologies, my screen is being a little sluggish. Okay. We also have another set of resources that we think might be very helpful to you. This is our brand new Fair Housing Ambassador Program Resource Guide, which consolidates fair housing information into an accessible resource for anyone conducting fair housing outreach. So it includes an outline of the basics of housing discrimination, downloadable posters about each protected class, information on how to file a federal fair housing complaint. My favorite part is the fair housing basics and tenant landlord presentations for your use, PowerPoints for you, and some of our favorite fair housing resources for other organizations. There are also additional resources on this website, including recordings of recent sessions with marketing professionals discussing best practices for engaging with and reaching communities with information. And I know Mary is dropping all sorts of links and information in the chat, so please keep an eye on that as we go through these resource slides. We also want to turn your attention to some upcoming activities. On April 28th, we will have the second installment of our Fair Housing Workshop for landlords and property managers. The workshop will cover best practices for advertising, screening tenants, and property rules and policies, tips to avoid discriminatory behavior and fair housing complaints, landlord rights and responsibilities, explanation of assistance animals and reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, and an overview of familial status discrimination or discrimination against families with children. So for more information, please, or to register, please visit the website. And again, that will be in the chat. We are also excited to announce the debut of Neighborhood Engagement for a More Affordable Houston, which is a study on how to best engage Houstonians in developing affordable homes. Commissioned by the City of Houston and conducted by outreach strategists, the study gives recommendations to developers and local community organizations who wish to conduct more effective neighborhood engagement. The study includes a literature review of relevant research findings, expert interviews on the local housing landscape, focus groups with Houstonians on topics around affordable homes, and an in-depth media guide with example collateral. Look for more information on this study to be published on the website, and join us for 2 educational events to learn about its key findings and how your organization can support the need for affordable homes. The first event is April 21st during the Housing Advocates meeting, and the second is the next day on April 22nd at HCDD's monthly Lunch and Learn. Again, please keep an eye on our website and social media for registration information coming soon for both events. And again, that study will be available on the website later this month. Okay, finally, let us remind you again, please make sure to attend one of our Fair Housing 101 workshops for this Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Preparedness Grant. Remember, in order to qualify for the Fair Housing and Hurricane Season Preparedness Grant, applicants must complete an online application and attend at least one of the Fair Housing 101 workshop sessions, even if you've already taken a version of it in the past. Applications are available online and are due on May 6th, my birthday. So please visit the website to register. And that information will be in the chat. Thank you again for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming Fair Housing workshops. Have a wonderful afternoon.